Good afternoon. How amazing has this conference been? We're so happy to have you here in San Diego, and I think the conference has been amazing. There's been a lot of learning, a lot of networking, a lot of celebrating. Could use that bottle of champagne up here. So we're going to get right to it. We have some amazing speakers, but first I want to acknowledge the board members. So if you'll stand up here in the front tables. We wanted to acknowledge the new board members, Manuel Medrano and Tim, here we go, Gonaros. Not the right way, but okay. He's not here at the moment. That means we made space for some new members, but two of us are leaving the board. Myself, Pauline Martinson, and also Alan Ha will be leaving. Okay, but we have some new officers. So next year, the chair of the board will be Colleen Foster. And Vice President Peter Sloat. And our treasurer will be Rob Hilton. Secretary Nick Lapis. We also have some board members taking different roles like TC liaison, so Laura McCohen. And for membership, Monica Da Vinci. That's not the right last name, is it? Yes. And then also Rick Anthony, acknowledge him on the board as well. Okay.
Thank you, Pauline. Definitely going to miss you. She's still going to be around, though. Won't let her leave. Well, again, thank you for an amazing conference, and we have such an aspiring group of leaders today. It is my great honor to bring some local leaders from my own community, Oceanside. Today, we're going to have two guest speakers. They are chefs. They have restaurants in the city of Oceanside. They are truly amazing and inspiring. Our first chef, Davin Waite, set out to find a forum that would allow him to source and prepare food in a manner consistent with his philosophies. Wrench and Rodent, Seabasstropub began as a pop-up, but quickly became a destination for those who appreciated Waite's creative and delicious approach to minimizing waste and celebrating local and sustainably sourced seafood, meats, and produce. Davin is an amazing leader in our community. He's not only doing amazing things at his restaurant, he's doing amazing things for our community, working in our schools, really reaching out to our city leadership to make it a better community, a healthier place for local food systems. He's also here with Willie Eick. After starting at a Japanese restaurant where the foundation of wasting less and finding a use for what would normally be trash was instilled in the daily routine, his curiosity of lesser-known ingredients and constantly looking to learn brought him to open 608 in Oceanside years later. Eick's goal is to bring a sense of time and place while focusing on the environment that surrounds him. He's another inspirational leader in our community, has an amazing restaurant, wonderful food. In Oceanside, we have this burgeoning scene of local food systems, restaurants that are sourcing from local farms and also giving back to the community. Both of these chefs have been phenomenal to work with as our city addresses organics, recycling, diversion. Yes, I've been in their dumpsters. Amazing experience. Can get really close to a chef by jumping in their dumpster and checking out what's going on. So it is with great honor to have both Davin and Willie here today. They are going to be speaking. Thank you.
Cool, the mic works. First, thank you all for being here, and thank you for doing what you do. Just want to start with, this is an hour, and this is a topic we're very passionate about collectively in this whole room. So we're going to try to get through this as quick as possible. I don't want anyone to feel themselves get older while we're still speaking. So just know that Chef Willie and myself are available to you basically for the rest of all of our lives. If we get an email from one of you 5 years down the road, we're going to be stoked to hear from you. And following the presentation, we're available at any point for any questions. So here we go. Quick, how do we minimize waste within the community? Source reduction strategies, total utilization, working with chefs in order to encourage these practices. These things that we'll touch on as we go through. My bio, it's not really about me as much as what we can all do together. This next video you're gonna see is just a quick background on what's going on in Oceanside and what can be achieved when local businesses, in this case restaurants, chefs, working with the city can accomplish. And real quick, it's just kind of sets the climate for what we're talking about, some of the magic that's gone on in our hometown. At this point, I mean, I know I'm kind of preaching to the choir on a lot of this stuff, and by being here, we're all people who are very passionate about this. So we'll probably touch some stuff that everybody knows about, and none of this is new stuff. I mean, this is a long history of food waste. It's been essential to human survival for years. It's just somewhere we got lost along the way, and these are just things that we've found from other cultures, other places, farmers, fishermen, in working with the city that are just kind of helping us get back on the path to zero waste. And in the restaurant case, you save a little money in the process too, but we'll get into that more. So here's a quick video, background on Oceanside.
As far as a love for cooking, since I can reach the stove, I've been cooking. Opening a restaurant in Oceanside had always been my dream. I wanted to do something in my hometown. I kind of like little trinkets and cool oddities and weird things. Jessica keeps me from turning the place into a total garage sale. I'm kind of a pack rat. A little bit of grit breeds the best art. Oceanside's one of the coolest cities to be a chef. A lot of the chefs that are in this city, they're still on their way up. They haven't reached their ceiling. As a city, everybody is a little bit more adventurous. I think we just kind of got that hunger for cool new stuff. People from all over the world come to Oceanside, but what keeps the restaurants going day in and day out is the locals. There's very few places in the world that you can have this perfect setting of beach less than 4 blocks away, farm less than 8 blocks away. We try to use as much local fish and produce as possible, work closely with local farms, especially Cyclops Farms.
The chefs really, we ping pong off each other. Someone like Davin is one of those crazy wizard, Einstein, what you got for me, I'm gonna make the weirdest things in the world.
Having Luke in town is really important. And the chefs, aside from our personal relationship with Luke, I mean, we need that.
I'd like to hope that maybe the farm has been maybe the nucleus of, the explosion, the chemistry that's like just sparking off. I think it has to do with like minds really crashing together.
A lot of the chefs in Oceanside really care. A lot of them are down for the challenge.
We're kind of food nerds, and we're also Oceanside people. We're a little, not rough, but we're not soft, and we get the work done.
Cool thing about Oceanside is all the business owners, we're all friends. A lot of people grew up together. A lot of people have known each other for multiple decades. The cooking community, I mean, we hang out together when we're not at work. No matter what, you support your own, definitely. Sometimes things There's a point in the universe where everything just lines up and the door opens and something cool is about to happen. And I think that's what's gone on here with the dining scene. I think Renton Road is light years better because we're in Oceanside. It's not just the Oceanside that's around it, it's the Oceanside that's in me. If you're lucky enough to live in a place like this and have the opportunity to work with the people you care about, why wouldn't you? I couldn't imagine being anywhere else.
Thank you. So yeah, I got to give a shout to the hometown. But the thing is this is one community. All of you represent communities. I've been to quite a few of those communities, and similar things are going on. These are all little pockets with people doing the right thing, people caring. Those pockets will eventually spread, and that's how we change the world. So that's why we had that in there. Why try to be a zero waste chef? Tale as old as time, talked a little bit about that. It's the right way to do things. It's one of those things that we as a species, we had it right the first time. There's the respect for any life taken. There's moral, ethical, religious reasons for doing that. Pick your own or all of the above. Respect for the craft. The art of cooking isn't necessarily taking the most expensive thing you can, putting it on a plate and taking credit for Mother Nature's work. I mean, it's still good food, but that's easy. The art of cooking is taking things and making them beautiful through technical ability, time, love, all of those things. Respect for culture and traditions. One thing we really enjoy is learning from other cultures and other cultures' food, and in those traditions, ingrained all the way back in those traditions, is a respect for the product. Because, where you see waste, I mean, those are resources. This little guy right here, he's a resource. And, I don't think mankind is in any position right now to be wasting resources. Money for the restaurateur, all the way up and down the food chain, there's a savings from not wasting. And in our case, in the early days of our restaurants, doing that, it helped us through those rough early years. I mean, it definitely adds to the bottom line. And just a funny one, because the survival of our species depends on it. But how we do it, look to the past, look to other cultures, market to your demographic. This is often forgotten. There are chefs around the world that can take things that are offcuts or not eaten in Western cultures and make them taste good. The missing link is how you market it. Number 5, tie it into comfort food. We, as a nation, will go to a ballpark and gladly pay $12 to $15 for a hot dog. And hot dogs are delicious, don't get me wrong, and we all know what hot dogs are. They're a genius way to reduce what could be waste. But come up to one of our restaurants and eat fish sperm soup, which is something that also reduces waste. And there's, got a little quiet in here when I said that. That's what I'm talking about. So what we found is tying it, the marketing. The marketing has worked for the way of thinking in our society that has gotten us into this mess. The best way to fight an enemy is to use the weapons they have. And marketing is huge. Now we have things like Instagram, Facebook, the social media, it levels the playing field. But somehow making that stuff cool. And we have examples of that, wings of the sea instead of yellowtail collar is an example. Comfort food is always there. Sharing information is really important. We work closely with Colleen and her team. As chefs, we share information. If Willie does something cool, he's calling me up and letting me know, and then I'm doing it, and then I'm showing it to another chef and saying, Willie did this. And, mankind has always progressed when people have talked to each other and shared information, and there's been dark ages when people have moved away from that communication. Number 6, kind of a joke, but it's a joke because it's true. pair it with bacon. It works, trust me. And bacon itself is another one of those weird little pieces of the animal that at one point, what are we gonna do with this? Oh, make bacon out of it. Genius, right? Wish I would have had that idea. Here we go. We're gonna introduce you to our lovely assistant Wilbur over there. But real quick, and we'll leave this on the screen. Creativity, it's more of a challenge for chefs. If you're doing the same thing every day, anybody does that, you get sick of it. You want to do something new. You want to explore. You want to figure out how to change things. And that's the heart of cooking. Financial, ideally a whole fish is going to cost you less money per pound than only buying the prime cuts. There's also the worry of what's going to happen to those prime cuts. Our unique situation, we are even able to buy other restaurants other than prime cuts, and figure out how to turn them into something that people are going to be stoked on. Flavor, just like bacon, offcuts can typically have the most flavor if you know how to treat it right. Sometimes they're a little more challenging to prepare. It takes a little more skill, definitely a little more time, but as bacon has shown us, it is worth the effort. Sustainability, and ideally, if we're using more fish, that's less fish that we have to take out of the ocean, and less waste. It's just good all around. So, on to Wilbur over here. Wilbur is a Pacific yellowtail. These guys are really cool. They breed fast. It's not like a tuna or a shark that takes ages to get to sexual maturity. And at the moment, for now, there's a lot of them out there. Also, a really versatile, delicious fish. And for what we're doing today, he's nice and big so you can all see him. So I'll move this along fast. Some of it I'll just kind of explain rather than do, just because of the time we have. But first, we're going to take off his head. Now, as I go through this, there's always the stock pot. Now, the stock pot is almost the easy way out. We want to find higher uses for things and treat the stock pot. Where the trash can might have been the last resort before, the stock pot has kind of now become the last resort. We want to raise the last resort all the way up, from the landfill up. So we're finding different ways to do with these things. There's always going to be enough fish bones to make stock out of. There's always going to be enough vegetable scraps. So in this head right here, the first thing that gets cut off and set away, and a lot of times first thing that goes in the trash can, there's a bone for that last resort, the stock. You can get into this part right here in the roof of the mouth. Typically on bigger fish, it's more substantial, but right in there is a soft spot where the knife goes in. You pull it in on both sides, cut back, and there's a beautiful little chunk of meat that hides right in there. And it's almost like a filet mignon if you get it off of a bigger fish like a tuna. It doesn't even taste like fish. It's crazy what hides in there. We have the cheeks, which is the soft spot right here. On a fish like a halibut, it's more substantial. So it comes from cutting right under the eye. You can kind of see it down in there. On a lot of fish, this muscle, these guys are swimming for food all the time. The muscle extends all the way into the head. So you can actually cut the scales off in here and pull meat out of that. So we'll leave that right here. Now this fish is the same on both sides, thankfully, so for the sake of time, we're gonna do one side, and trust me that the other side is exactly the same. Now what we're pulling here, kind of like the prime cuts, you got the belly and the shoulder. Shoulder on a fish like this we use for cooking. And there's no such thing as bad cuts of meat. There's bad butchers, and there's definitely lazy chefs out there. But, every plant and animal is pretty much perfect. It's just our key to unlock that perfection. So, there, we've just cut the side off. There's still a few more cuts intact. We're gonna come back to this spine, because even that's usable before it goes into the stock pot. We have the rib section. This is bloodline, and then this bone here is the collar. This is what you're gonna see on the wings of the sea. So this little guy comes off. These have been discarded for years. But like any type of meat, you know that it's always tastier on the bone. You have all that goodness hiding in the bone that's going to bleed into the meat when you cook it, and it's going to be really flavorful. And who doesn't like sucking on a bone, you know? It's kind of, since caveman times, we've been doing it. So we're going to pull off the rib cage here. Now, before we even get to the rib cage, just for the sake of cleanliness in the presentation, there's guts that can be used. The hearts are amazing yakitori style. If they're a little too bitter, you can soak them in things like milk, which is known to extract the bitterness. Sperm, eggs, also delicious. I mean, eggs, byproduct. Look at caviar. It's one of the most expensive seafood products in the world right now. So really, what our culture has taught us to be waste is we like to think of it more as a delicacy. Sperm is amazing, fish sperm. It almost tastes like liver. It's like a really mild liver taste. Really, really clean. A lot of the stuff, if you keep an open mind, it's definitely not what you'd even expect it to taste like. So we've got the ribs off here. You can kind of, the lights are facing me, not you, but you kind of see through where there's flesh in the little bones. What you do is you just cut between those, and it gives you a perfect little rib. And a little marketing comes in here because, we love beef ribs, we love baby back ribs, we love pig ribs. Fish ribs are just as good for the exact same reason. So coming down, we have the bloodline with a little bit of bones in it. And this is a bit extreme. You can't expect this in a lot of restaurants, a lot of places. But we actually save it for our dogs. We feed them as pet food, and they love us for it. That's your bloodline. This can also be, there's a few different techniques. Things like ginger, lemon can take that bitter flavor out of it. That's what the Westerners don't like. In Hawaii, they dry it and make like a jerky. They call it aku. The old timers love it. Rinsing it on a tuna, rinsing it in water, and it cooks up a lot like steak if it's handled. And that's the stuff that, dog food. The Japanese also they believe that the nutrients in that bloodline help prevent cancer. I'm not a doctor, I don't know the proof behind it. And then another little trick is leaving a little bit of that in sushi, leaving a bit of that bloodline on the meat. With the fish, the meat is typically fatty and sweet, and a little bit of bitterness balances that fattiness. Some people get weirded out by it, but really you're supposed to leave it on there, and especially if you have a really nice piece of fish, that bloodline's gonna be red. So by leaving that bloodline on there, you're not being sloppy, you're putting it in the customer's face like, hey, look how fresh my stuff is. And it's, in Western cultures that can be misinterpreted as sloppiness, but that's really what's going on there. So you have a shoulder loin, which can be made the perfect little steaks, and this is a more common use for it. Then we have our belly side. You're going to notice the belly is a little fatter. Usually the prime cut to serve raw, which this whole thing can be eaten raw. That's, there's nothing. In sushi, you kind of want to use your cutting techniques to make it melt in your mouth. And then the grainier bits you would typically cook, because cooking, the fat and the graininess cooks out of it. You're going to take the skin off just by sliding the knife along there. So we have a prime belly cut, and this would be, you kind of go like this. And that's what we call sashimi. Put it on a piece of rice, that's what you'd call nigiri. And then the skin, one of my favorite parts. We make chips out of it. We've even found like dehydrated malt vinegar that you can mix with salt, and you make salt and vinegar fish skin crisps, and it's insane. You know, that, I guess that's the English in me, but you know, the skin is even salmon skin hand rolls are Japanese. They can be you know, a vessel for anything you want to put on there. You could make your ceviche with the meat, put it back on the fish skin crisp, and it's kind of a neutral, crispy, cool textured delivery system. So last, real quick, I'm just going to show you how far you can take this stuff. Another thing I missed was, regardless of, you know, what your beliefs are on foie, you know, when it was illegal in California, a lot of chefs were taking fish livers and using it to fill that void that foie being banned in California left. So there's really tuna stomachs. You can actually cut it into rings and make fake calamari. I mean, it's just imagination is the only imagination and willingness are the only limiting factors. And the weirdest thing is, like, you know, we test all this stuff out on ourselves first because, you know, you don't want an embarrassing situation, you know. And if you just keep an open mind and try some of this stuff, so many things that come out of the ocean and the earth are tasty, you know. It's like the experiment, you know, that I did with my kids where, you know, I didn't want to teach them that broccoli was gross. If I taught them that broccoli was delicious, and they love broccoli, you know, it's all kind of how we perceive things and how we teach future generations. So normally I'd be scraping the meat off of this bone with a spoon. And that would go into a ceviche, a dip. You can smoke it, make a mousse. So this guy was a mirror image of what we had before. So before this goes into the stock pot, you could still, and it helps with bigger fish. Swordfish is the best. But you can crack this guy right between the vertebrae. You see there's like a little jelly sac in there. When we have a disc slip and our backs hurt, that means it escaped, you know? And fish have the same thing, but this is a real sweet fish bone marrow. And this little thing is like the ultimate oyster shooter. Sweet, mild ocean flavor. And I mean, come on, it's gotta be good for you, right? You know? So that's that with our fish. Hopefully that sparks a few ideas. And thank you. Cool, we're on up here now. So, that's fish. Moving on to veggies. Sorry to make you watch so many videos of me, but we got another one which really transitions us nicely into plants. Our community, a driving force behind the plant side of things has been Cyclops Farms. Having a farmer that works closely with us, that we can in turn work closely with to use everything that he's got. And the same thinking that we just applied to this fish can be applied to plants. And it's funny because people will get just as weird about eating parts of the plant that aren't typically eaten as they will about a fish that, you know, fish kind of weird people out. But, you know, farmers, you know, people think chefs work long hours and have it tough, and the restaurant business has fine, you know, slim margins and all of that. Farmers and fishermen, they really do. San Diego, unfortunately, has lost a few farms this year, a couple big ones. And anything we can do to help keep that resource in our community, in our case, it's trying to help buy every little piece that they invest energy and resources into producing, can help. And hopefully, you know, as chefs, you know, that is our part that we can play to help keep that resource in the community, because once again, the survival of our species kind of depends on it. So here's a quick intro into applying that logic to plants.
Just about everything out there can be made to taste good. Some things take a little more time, skill, and technique than others. Plants like broccoli, we cut off this tiny little bud at the top and we leave this plant often 4 or 5 feet in diameter because nobody knows what to do with it. Some people don't know it's edible. Some people don't know how to best prepare it. We definitely like to take the other 80% of the plant and do our best to put it on the plate. One thing we do is take the broccoli leaves. They're good for stir-fried vegetables. We make like a quick kraut. We take the ribs from the leaves and caramelize them and make a pesto. Food waste doesn't necessarily start at the grocery store or in your own refrigerator. It starts with the consciousness of what the end consumer thinks of as food, what chefs think of as food. If you're going to kill something, then you honor that creature or plant's life by using every little piece that you can. That's led to some creativity, but when you see the care that these farmers put into the food, it really makes you not want to waste a single piece. The amount of food that is not consumed that never even leaves the farm is shocking if you really look at it. Possibilities are endless. The only limiting factor is the creativity and the willingness of the chef and the people to eat it.
Cool. Thank you. The funny thing is that video was actually a knife commercial. We got a brilliant filmmaker in San Diego called Sam Wells, definitely a name to follow. He had this, Wurstoff contacted him in a chef's role from Germany, and they're like, look, we like what you're doing, we want you to make a commercial for us. And Sam is super big into sustainability. He has his own blog and all that also. And he kind of hijacked the knife commercial and started sliding positive messages in there, which it was really fun to be a part of. But that, more than anything, there's some stuff being repeated, but like, picture's worth 1,000 words. You got to see Cyclops. I think the most moving image in that is that was a cauliflower plant. So you know that we eat this off the top, and you saw the size of that thing. And that's typically, it does get tilled back into the soil, but how many? Once again, we're pulling up that part, trying to find better uses. Using the whole plant, relationships with farmers. As I mentioned, we work together. Hey, Luke, what are you not moving? What can we do with this? We'll try to figure something out. We'll showcase it at the restaurants, try to get people to, the proximity helps, get people to go up to the farm stand that day and ask to buy the broccoli leaves. They got to try them. If you can make somebody taste something, if you can gain their trust, and it tastes good and you've done your part, then 99% of the time they're going to like it. It's just kind of getting through. Added value, helping these farmers sell everything they grow, every piece of everything they grow is super important. That little top of the broccoli and that big plant that would have gotten thrown away, the same amount of resources went into growing all of that. So they might as well use every piece of it. Keeping it out of landfills. There's certain cuts, the ribs of the leaves that we burnt and made a puree out of. Chef Willie's going to get further into that stuff. But once, the whole plant doesn't go home with you, but the leaves do, and the ribs would go in the trash can in your average household. So just teaching people that's super good food. Just like the fish, some of the highest nutrient content is in those parts of the plant that you have to mess with a little bit to make it a little more palatable. But if you do, just like the fish, those are the pieces that actually taste the best. Uglies. In San Diego, we have a company, Save Good Food, has really taken the lead in helping farmers offload ugly stuff. I mean, we've kind of been brainwashed by society. The apple for the teacher kind of thing. It's got to be a shiny red apple. Dude, the ugly apples taste better. But we just got it. It's been through advertising. It's been beaten into us that it has to be this way. You can't have a blemish. I've got a different take on leaves with holes that bugs have chewed in them. Because, you're a bug. You eat nothing but leaves. So you're going to know what the best leaves out there are, right? So, Thank you. So, back to the bottom line, which, it doesn't, it shouldn't all have to be about money, but in this day and age it is. You can often obtain that stuff cheaper. And for the farmer, it's like, at least they're getting something for a lot of that stuff, because it's amazing what sits and rots. I mean, I know you all, I'm sure you all see it. And so just a picture is worth 1,000 words. What you have, I don't know how to best, starting from me to the other side. They're yellowtail ribs. On the top is an example of the swordfish bone marrow. Bigger fish, softer, more cartilage-like skeleton, easier to get into, more rewarding fruit for the labor. They're actually bruleed on top of the seared swordfish that we cut off of the bone, because that little bit of burnt sugar is something that helps introduce people into the weirdness of eating bone marrow. So it's kind of marketing. Whole fried sculpin. Sculpin has been huge marketing again. Ballast Point has a really successful IPA called Sculpin. Now everybody knows what Sculpin is. It's cool to be a Sculpin. It's cool to eat Sculpin. 5 years ago, you couldn't give this stuff away. And there's lots of it. So a whole fried fish is, it's like getting a whole rotisserie chicken. It's amazing. It's rewarding. It's cooked on the bone. You got all that flavor. Wings of the sea, far right. That's the collar that I showed you, tying it into comfort food. They are kind of like wings of the sea. And if, you're eating something with a knife and fork off the bone, it kind of like, okay, how am I going to do it? It's going to be hard. Pick it up with your fingers. Eat it like a chicken wing. Nobody's got any problem doing that at a sports bar. We even made a little Korean barbecue wing sauce. And it works. Down there, you got little banana peel nigiri and banana peel tacos. Banana peel is part of the plants. I mean, usually when there's a wasteful habit in our society, there's an old wives' tale that is completely false, but it supports that habit. The thing about banana peels being poisonous, well, we test this out on ourselves. They're actually really delicious and they're super absorbent, so they're kind of like a future meat substitute. And we don't use enough bananas to make enough banana peel tacos, so we've partnered with smoothie shops in our community, and we basically take their excess resources from them. Oh, just a little recap, and a lot of this you've seen. It's really cool that things like this have popped up all over the place. Short ribs, pork belly. These are all last decade's waste, and because it was cheaper per pound, chefs slowly figured out how to make it taste good. Now you can't go to a gastropub. I mean, you're not really a real gastropub if you don't have pork belly. So that's good. It's a step in the right direction, but we got more work to do. This will all be available afterwards. I'm going to, on the sake of keeping time, move it on to Willie.
So I got started probably a lot less long ago than he did. But the first restaurant I worked in, they basically came up to me and they said, here's a tiny mixing bowl, that's your bowl of trash. You don't get to empty it, you don't get to do anything. So you're doing massive amounts of prep, but that's all you had to use for trash. So it just became instilled originally from my daily routine. Okay, you have to figure out how to use what would go in there, like broccoli ribs and leaves and fish bones, and figure out how to get that. And then I was able to, throughout the years, once I opened my own place, kind of start to teach that to my cooks and kind of broaden the horizons on that. And then I think next we have a little video, just kind of goes over the little, tells you a little bit about the restaurant and myself.
The concept of 608 in my mind is bringing elegant food with a relaxed environment, no white tablecloth, no pretentious suit and tie ordeal, just something you can walk in off the beach, board shorts, tank top, sit down, and really serve top quality food. The way we thought about doing that was small plates, smaller portions, everyone can share it, to try to keep the cost down while giving people the best product we could. I think to make a good dish, you have to have good ingredients, and you got to make sure you're doing your part to find the best ingredient. A lot of times that's sustainable ingredients. I like to show a respect for my ingredients and not try to make them something they're not. I like everything to be very simple in plating, very simple in what I'm doing with the ingredient, but just maximize the flavor of the food that's coming out. My plating style is very natural in its feeling, very elegant, very refined, but the way I want the dish to look when it comes out, it's a little bit more how it would look in nature. I think the best way to represent food is to respect the ingredient, respect your environment, respect your suppliers. You gotta respect everything around and make sure it stays around.
So to kind of follow with that respective ingredient, we're going to go back to fish a little bit, just to touch on it. And a lot of times when the boats are going out, they're catching massive, massive amounts of fish, and they're using nets. And a lot of times there's a lot of bycatch that sits at the bottom of these nets. Not only do they die, they get thrown back in the ocean. And if we learned how to utilize this fish and make it taste good and explain that to people, we could probably get people to eat more of that bycatch, which means less tuna is catch, less yellowtail is catch. And then you broaden the horizon of what's available to the mass public. And then you can get into that with plants as well. Or even, I'm a big kind of forager. I like to go out and pick random plants, like got my little buddy from outside right here. And most people don't really know that there's plants growing right under their nose that are completely edible. You can go outside. This guy right here, he's called a Noodle plum. It's growing on the bushes, literally outside. And if we kind of teach this to people, maybe they can be like, okay, you know, instead of harvesting just a carrot, because a carrot tastes great, they can harvest more and broaden their palates. So you're using less carrots, you're using less of the main staple plants that we're used to, which will sustain everything else. And then once we kind of teach people about foraging and all that other wild edibles, we have to figure out how to do that responsibly. And how do we do that responsibly is if you're growing and you're picking one plant right here and you take all of it, it's not going to grow back. So you have to know, okay, let that plant grow, take only maybe a quarter of it, let it sustain its life and grow to be a bigger plant. And then go over here, because you can find the same plant almost right next to it half the time, and take more of that and then let them grow up together. We can also talk about what would be trash. There was this one time I was in a kitchen and a sous chef burnt a bunch of eggplant, and we're sitting there and we're like, oh no, it's trash. And I looked at it and I was like, you know what? I don't think just because it's burnt, it's trash. So we kind of turned it into this rub for a steak, and it actually balanced out the rich fattiness of the steak and kind of brightened all the flavors. So we kind of started looking into that, and you can go to a bar and you see the bartender, he pulls the tap, he pours out the foam, and it keeps going, and okay, now here's your beer. Well, what if they save that foam, let the carbonation go away, and over time, now they have vinegar. So you can do that with wine too. Maybe a guest doesn't finish a bottle of wine. Hopefully they're not just drinking straight out of the bottle of wine, but you can go and you can keep that in containers and turn that into vinegar, and then you can sustain that over time. Bones for broth, anything else like that. I mean, we can get into a lot more extravagant preparations, but that would take a lot more time. And then we also have the time and place cuisine, which I really like to focus on myself, like what is available here, what's available now, and kind of changing. We've all heard of seasonality at this point. You can even go even beyond that and not import corn from South America in the middle of winter just because we want to eat some corn. We kind of just use what's available, what's here, what's now to make our environment around us more sustainable. And then there's There's always using leftover stuff from other businesses at a food bank. We can create these food banks and take the day-old breads, the produce that a grocery store doesn't think is going to be good for the shelf because, again, it's ugly produce, or maybe it sat there and it got a blemish because some kid picked it up and dropped it on the ground. And we can start using that in food banks. And we can create, which I believe Oceanside is doing, kind of like a kitchen. And we can start feeding less fortunate people. I know there's some very world-renowned chefs. Massimo Bottura is one of them. I think he was #1 in the world last year. Kind of started these programs in churches and stuff and feeding homeless people with all the surplus and the underutilized waste from restaurants, from grocery stores, all these other things. I just wanted to put in quote for you guys the documentary that was put on Netflix. Great documentary. I highly recommend watching it. Kind of steps into that. And I think it's something that we could still do here. Just because they're doing it in Italy doesn't mean that we can't do it. Just because it's not our idea doesn't mean we can't help build it. And then we can go beyond just cooking. We can go with our landscape even. We can talk about, okay, we want to be sustainable as human beings, but what happens if we cut down a big area of trees and build a bunch of houses? That's less land for the farmers. That's less oxygen for us, which I think we need. And then we also have to teach that to the next generations. We can kind of start to instill that now with all of us in this room, but if we don't take this farther and start teaching the children, it's gonna fall off. No one's gonna learn about it. So we have to figure out how can we instill that in the next generation. We can start them young, like he said, teach your kids to like broccoli. We can put farming classes and foraging classes into schools and teach them about the native ingredients and indigenous ingredients and how to harvest it, how to respect it, how to take care of it, and how to let it keep growing and growing and growing. And this is just some menu items from my restaurant that we use. Like, we do octopus, but we use the beef trimmings from all of our burgers and any other steaks that we might bring in, and we boil that down in a broth. So instead of just throwing it in the trash, we repurpose it. Pine bark cookie sounds really weird, but actually if you look back into Native Americans, they were actually eating there's like layers of bark. There's the very, very outside, which I actually use, but there's this inner bark, which actually you can harvest that. Yeah, it sounds weird, you're eating a tree, but it actually tastes kind of good.
Yeah, it is good.
Crudo with whey butter sauce. We make our own cheese in-house. And a lot of times you might see these big cheese makers, they have all this whey, and where does it go? We turn it into a butter sauce. It's phenomenal. And then we've done desserts utilizing the entire plant of a sunflower. Not a lot of people know that not only is this beautiful flower edible beyond just the seeds, but you can go to the roots, the stem, the leaves, the heart actually eats like an artichoke, which is, we can teach people how to use entire plants, then we can just keep going, and where's the end from there? Duck skin tacos. Duck skin tacos was a really cool idea. It was like pork belly. It was really, really cheap when it was presented to us, because a lot of people are buying just duck breast and they want the skin off. And now these companies have 40-pound boxes of duck skin, and where's that gonna go? They made it really, really cheap for us, so we had to figure out, okay, what can we do? How can we present this? Tacos is one of the easiest ways to present something to somebody. Taco Tuesday,
We're in San Diego.
And then just like carrot tops even, you can cut them off, toss them into a salad. You can use them as garnish if you want to look all fine dining. Powders, salts, you can go way, way beyond that.
Cool. That takes us to look no further than the city of Oceanside. And this is I keep wanting to point at that screen like you can all see it, but and there's a really cool story with this, because we also like to get involved in the schools. Chef Willie brushed on it with the future generations. When I was my kids' age, I honestly believed that I was going to grow up and try to change the world someday. And you guys all are. That's what we're. And, in your childhood imagination, you always envision it being bigger and more grandiose, And really, as a grown-up, you learn that it's the little things you do and the ripple effect, and it makes a huge difference. But when we go into these schools and do these demonstrations, trying to teach this to kids, trying to teach kids how to grow food, how to be less wasteful, Green Oceanside is always there at our back, teaching them their side of the message. But when you look into the kids' faces, you realize that, when you tell them that Tony the Tiger's been lying to them, they get pissed off. They are angry. And I think, we've got a momentum growing. The movement is growing. It's common sense. Might have taken a step back with the current regime in office, but every time you take a step back, you charge forward 10 more steps when it comes back around again. And I really see that hope. I really see that hope, and I'm sure you see that in your kids at home too. But the start of this story is the organics pilot. This was back at the end of last summer. I need to note that it was during a really intense heat wave, and our dumpster there was a lot going on in our dumpster. None of it was good. Not a nice place to be. So, trying to stay ahead of the game, we did the organics pilot, which, and in a deal with a chef, chef's got a lot going on, they're busy, and doing anything different, changing routines is tough. If somebody moves my trash can 6 inches, it screws up my whole night, Separated pre and post consumer waste, that's actually Colleen and Sarah in the dumpster right there. But we did this organics pilot. Came time to build a garden at Garrison to help teach. It's one of the less privileged schools in the city, and also it was the kids weren't rating as well on their health scores, so there needed to be a garden there. And we'd kind of forgotten about this trial. We're excited and waiting for it to become a reality, and we needed dirt. Well, a Corazon compost came through. We posted on Facebook that we're trying to get this done, and as Oceanside always does, the community comes together. That dirt that built that garden was the leftover waste from the pilot program. So the loop closed. It happened, and most importantly, it can happen again and again, and until we fix this place, because we all got to live here, right? I'm just going to leave this for everybody. I don't think there's anybody here that's really going to disagree, but pretty shocking number, and the good thing is we can fix this. We are fixing this. So thank you so much, you guys. Definitely. That's cool.
Davin. Both Chef Davin and Willie, they've changed my world. I started with California rolls. Now I go into his restaurant and I let him feed me whatever he wants, and it's really weird stuff, but it's amazing. They are truly inspirational people, and our zero waste recycling presentations today are cooking classes with these chefs, and they are amazing. And there are so many amazing chefs out there. Our next conference should be filled with a room full of chefs because they are our future and our opportunity for organic. So thank you so much. We actually don't have that much time, but I want to open the audience up for one, maybe two questions, and then they're going to be available after for questions, and they have a bunch of resources that they would be willing to give you. So anyone have any questions?
Thank you both so much. This was so amazing and phenomenal to have like the hands-on tutorials and everything. And thank you so much for coming to speak with us. But I was wondering if you could also talk about, you talk a lot about the pre-consumer waste, you know, what chefs can do before they prepare food and give it to consumers. But could both of you talk about what your opinions or what do you have thoughts on about engaging consumers in terms of wasting food on their end? Because especially with like foodie culture becoming a big thing and millennials, I've seen, you know, people going to restaurants that are super trendy and wanting to try the best burger in the city or whatever, and then leaving half of it on their plate. So just could you talk about, do you have any thoughts about engaging consumers and what that responsibility is as a chef, and on being able to communicate with people by saying, hey, we're doing our part, can you do your part as well, without it coming off as like, you know, you don't want to turn people away from your business.
But this could be a long one, so I'll try to keep it quick, and then I could talk more after. First off, I mean, when I started cooking, we were in the back of the restaurant. Nobody wanted to look at us, and nobody wanted to know we existed, you know? So now we have, with Food Network and restaurants being trendy, I mean, food's always been cool. It's just, you know, finally people are recognizing it. We actually have that platform. And with that platform does come a responsibility. That's doing stuff like this, trying to get out, educate people. We try to get out in all sorts of events with all, you know, mixed audiences and kind of share, you know, these videos kind of went around, and hopefully, yeah, people do pick up these habits at home. We do everything we can to educate. We can always do more. As far as post-consumer, I will say that there is way more to portion control in restaurants than just food cost and just bottom line. Because it's easier to find a sushi chef than it is to find a dishwasher, and because it's a great way for me to learn, I end up washing dishes for a short period of time, at least once a week, maybe more, and you know, full time at least once every 2 months, I'm the dishwasher. That's the most important role in the restaurant because you see everything that goes in the trash can. Checking your own trash is so important because you see what works and doesn't work. And maybe there's something that I'm not doing right flavor-wise, and why is this going in the trash can? So you gotta ask those questions, and you gotta adjust your menu accordingly. Ideally, you know, thank you. Now, ideally, if it isn't, you know, something that we're doing, I mean, I do believe we have to use our platform as chefs to, you know, get it to where people aren't over ordering and leaving stuff on their plate. And education is gonna have to solve that. And I think as times change, more and more people are gonna feel more responsible. But, you know, the way we cook, they should want to take that home. And when we see that, and it does happen, none of us are perfect. Sometimes you take a risk, you know, and something, you know, it's not right for the right person. But yeah, you just try to minimize that.
Well, everyone, thank you. We have to actually head on to our next presentation, but thank you so much, David and Willie.
Thank you.
So with that, we'd like to introduce Peter Sloat, Laura. They're going to come up and announce next year's conference. Thank you.
All right. I'm Peter Sloat.
And I'm Laura McCoyan.
And we will be your 2018 conference co-chairs. Yes. And everybody wants to know, where is it going to be?
Big mystery, the big reveal.
Wait, and it's
Nobody
knows. Oakland! Yes! Yes, yes.
That's not. That's close. That's exact.
Got a picture of. Got a picture of. Fremont, California.
Also close.
Our neighbors to the south. CRRA sponsors. Odd how they get in there.
They're great.
But then
What's this?
Livermore, the great city of Livermore, our Oakland's neighbor to the east, and also a CRA sponsor. Funny. Oh, into the mic.
Working. I didn't even know it was on.
What Pixar? Oh, Emeryville. Okay, guys.
Close by.
We have a picture of Oakland.
Keep
we
it
have-
going.
we have a-
There has to be a picture of Oakland in there somewhere. Is that it?
Okay, if that's the best we can do. But seriously, folks, if you haven't been to downtown Oakland in many years, you're in for a great, great treat. Their nightlife, the cuisine,
Fox Theater, Lake Merritt.
the energy. We'll be returning to the Oakland Marriott and Convention Center
Yes.
in beautiful downtown Oakland, 12 minutes from downtown San Francisco, so you have two cities at your feet. Beautiful Oakland and the Marriott. And your hosts this year brought to you by
The great people of San Francisco Department of Environment. I was supposed to do Cal Recycle, I jumped the gun. The great people of San Francisco Department of Environment and the tremendous folks at Stop Waste.
and the great city of Oakland, California. Until then, safe travels.
And we'll see you in Oakland.
On a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. There she stood in the doorway. Heard the mission bell, and I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven and this could be hell. Then she lit up a candle, and she showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say, welcome to the Hotel California.
If you're on the Petco Park tour, please come check in the lobby.
Such a lovely place, such a lovely face. Plenty of room at the Hotel California. Any time of year, you can find it here. Her mind is Tiffany twisted. She got the Mercedes Benz. She got a lot of pretty, pretty boys that she calls friends. How they dance in the courtyard, sweet summer sweat. Some dance to remember, some dance to forget. So I called up the captain, please bring me my wine. He said, we haven't had that spirit here since 1969. And still those voices are calling from far away. Wake you up in the middle of the night just to hear them say, welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place, such a lovely place, such a lovely face. They're living it up at the Hotel California. What a nice surprise, what a nice surprise. Bring your alibis. Mirrors on the ceiling, they pink champagne on ice. And she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. And in master's chambers. They're gathered for their feast. They stab it with their stealing eyes, but they just can't